Hello everyone. I know many of you are watching this video to fall asleep. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments what time you're watching and where you're from. Now, let's begin and relax together. We feel like saving every penny is the smartest thing to do. Well, there's actually a paradox at play here. You see, when everyone saves too much, it can lead to economic stagnation. It's like when we all decide to hold on to our coins so tightly that they stop circulating altogether. The economy needs some flow, some movement of money to keep things going. If we're all just hoarding our cash, it's hard for businesses to grow and create jobs. It's a bit like trying to start a fire by holding on to all the matches a euro. Eventually, you might get nowhere fast. Now, don't get me wrong, saving is good, but moderation is key. Imagine saving enough for a rainy day, but leaving room for some sunshine too. That way, you've got a nice balance. And who knows, maybe one day you'll even want to lend out some of those saved coins to help others start their own fires. Just think about it, a euro. Saving isn't always about keeping everything locked away. Sometimes it's about sharing the warmth. We think that making things more efficient will automatically lead to less waste. Well, Jevons paradox shows us that isn't always true. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you have a really old car that gets terrible gas mileage, but it's so inefficient that you only drive it occasionally because it costs too much to run. Now imagine you replace it with a brand new hybrid that gets amazing fuel economy. At first, you might think you'll be driving less because it's cheaper to operate. But here's the thing, because the new car is so much more efficient, you start feeling guilty when you don't use it. So you end up driving more often, even though each trip uses less gas overall. This is basically what happened with light bulbs back in the 1800s. As factories got better at producing them, the cost went down, but people just used more bulbs overall. It's kind of mind-bending, isn't it? We tend to assume that being more efficient means we'll naturally consume less. But Jevons paradox shows us that's not always the case. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether all our efforts to make things greener are actually leading to more of everything. I find this really interesting because it challenges our assumptions about how the world works. It's like discovering that the more efficient your house is at keeping warm, the more likely you are to turn up the thermostat. It's a reminder that human behavior is complicated, and there's no straightforward solution to our environmental problems. What do you think about this paradox? Does it change how you think about trying to live more sustainably? You know how we often think that more money means greater happiness? Well, there's this interesting thing called the Easterlin paradox that challenges that idea. It suggests that once our basic needs are met, additional wealth doesn't necessarily lead to more joy. Think of it like filling a bucket. At first, each new drop makes a big difference. But eventually, no matter how much water you add, the bucket just gets fuller without bringing us any more satisfaction. This paradox was first observed by economist Richard Easterlin back in the 1970s. He found that while incomes were rising dramatically in many countries, people's reported levels of happiness weren't keeping pace. It's almost as if we get used to our comfortable lives and start taking them for granted. For instance, imagine you've just moved into a beautiful new home. At first, every little detail feels wonderful. The big kitchen, the cozy bedroom, the backyard. But after a while, you stop noticing all those things because they've become normal. That's kind of what happens when we accumulate wealth over time. We adapt to our circumstances, and what brought us joy initially no longer does. So, why might this be happening? Some experts suggest it could be due to our tendency to compare ourselves to others who have more than we do. Or maybe it's because we focus too much on material possessions rather than experiences and relationships that truly bring us fulfillment. Whatever the reason, it's worth thinking about, especially in today's world where consumerism seems to drive so much of our culture. It feels like services are getting more expensive even though the people providing them seem to be working just as hard. That's kind of what Bommel's cost disease is all about. It's like trying to keep up with inflation while your wages stay the same. Imagine running a restaurant. The food costs go up, but you still need to pay your waiters and chefs. If you raise prices too much, customers might stop coming. So you have to find ways to make things cheaper, but there's only so far you can stretch a dollar. This happens in lots of industries, from healthcare to education. It's not because people are being greedy. It's just that some jobs are harder to make more efficient. Does that make sense? It's a bit like trying to speed up a horse-drawn carriage when everyone knows cars are the future. We think that just because something is rare, it must be worth more, but that's not always true. Take diamonds, For instance, they're made of carbon, just like pencil lead, but diamonds are worth thousands while pencils cost pennies. Why? It's not because diamonds are intrinsically better. It's because we've decided as a society to value them more. We've created this illusion of scarcity around diamonds, making them seem special and exclusive. Imagine you're at a beach and you find a beautiful shell. To you, it might be precious because it's unique and reminds you of your vacation. But if everyone started finding shells like that, they'd lose their specialness. That's kind of what happened with diamonds. Their rarity became their main selling point, not any inherent quality they have over other materials. It's like how a limited edition book might be more valuable than a regular one, not because it's better, but because there aren't as many of them around. This paradox of value a euro, where rarity doesn't always equal worth a euro, can be seen in many things we consider valuable. Art, collectibles, even some types of real estate. Their value often comes from what we believe about them, rather than any practical use they have. It's interesting to think about how our perceptions shape what we consider valuable, isn't it? When we're really hungry, even if our favorite food isn't available, we'll still be happy to eat just about anything. That's kind of what happens with people who are struggling financially. They might not have the luxury of choosing between different types of food, but they'll still want to eat. This idea is called the Jiffin goods paradox. Imagine you're on a tight budget, and you need to buy groceries every week. If bread suddenly became more expensive, you might start looking for cheaper alternatives, right? But here's the thing. Even though bread got pricier, people still kept buying it. In fact, they might even buy more of it. It sounds strange, but this actually happens when people are very poor. Let me explain why this might happen. When money is tight, people often focus on getting enough calories rather than variety in their diet. Bread is cheap and gives you energy quickly, so it becomes a go-to choice. Even if it costs more per loaf, it's still cheaper than other options that would give you the same amount of food. This paradox is named after Sir Robert Jiffin, who first noticed this strange behavior in food markets during the 19th century. It's especially true for staple foods like rice, potatoes, or cornmeal. These foods might not be as tasty as other options, but they're affordable and fill you up. So, in a way, poverty can actually increase demand for certain foods. It sounds counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it. When money is tight, people look for ways to stretch their budget. And sometimes that means buying more of cheaper foods even if they cost more per unit. This paradox has important implications for how we think about poverty and food policy. It suggests that simply making food cheaper isn't always the best solution. Instead, we might need to focus on creating jobs, improving wages, or finding other ways to help people afford better diets. Does this make sense? It's a pretty mind-bending concept, isn't it? But it's an important one to understand if we want to really address hunger and malnutrition around the world. You walk into a store and feel overwhelmed by all the choices? It's like being in a candy shop, but instead of sweet treats, there are rows upon rows of products calling out to you. The paradox of choice, my friend, suggests that while having more options might seem better, it can actually make us feel stuck. Imagine trying to choose just one flavor from a giant ice cream sundae bar a euro. It's hard to decide when everything looks so delicious. This is what happens when we have too many choices. Our minds get bogged down in weighing pros and cons, and before long, we find ourselves unable to make a decision at all. It's as if our brains are playing a game of which option is best, over and over again, never quite landing on an answer. So next time you're faced with a sea of possibilities, remember, sometimes less really is more. Ask yourself, do I need this many choices, or would fewer options set me free? You visit a small town, and everything seems to revolve around one main street. That's kind of like what happens when markets become dominated by a few large players. It starts innocently enough a euro. Maybe one company innovates a bit faster than others, or has better connections. But before long, they're the ones everyone looks up to, and smaller competitors struggle to keep up. It's as if these big players have become the town square, drawing all the attention and business their way. This winner-takes-all effect can happen in many industries: tech, finance, even retail. It's like watching a snowball roll down a hill, gaining speed and size as it goes. At first, it might seem exciting to see such growth, but eventually, it can leave the market feeling a bit, well, one-sided. You might wonder what happened to all those smaller businesses that used to make things interesting. But here's the thing. This isn't necessarily bad news for consumers. Often, these dominant companies have the resources to invest in cutting-edge technology or customer service. They can offer products at scale that smaller competitors just can't match. It's like having a big department store versus a handful of quirky boutiques a euro. Sometimes convenience wins out. Still, there's value in diversity too. Smaller players might bring fresh ideas or cater to niche markets that bigger companies overlook. They could be the ones pushing innovation forward while the giants are busy maintaining their market share. So, what do you think? Is a market dominated by a few large players always a bad thing? Or can it work out okay for everyone involved? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Things seem to snowball? That's kind of what we're talking about here. The Matthew effect is this idea that advantages tend to accumulate over time. It's like watching a small seed grow into a mighty oak tree. At first, it might not seem like much, but gradually, it becomes hard to ignore. Let me give you an example. Imagine two artists, both starting out with similar talent. One gets noticed early on and starts selling more paintings. They get more exposure, which leads to more sales, and before long, galleries are clamoring for their work. Meanwhile, the other artist struggles to gain traction. Their art isn't seen by as many people, so they don't sell as much, making it even harder to get noticed. This effect shows up in all sorts of areas: education, business, even sports. It's almost as if the world is saying, you've got a bit of success? Well, let's give you more opportunities. But it can also work against us if we're struggling. It's a reminder that every step forward counts, no matter how small it seems at the time. And who knows, that tiny step could be the one that sets off a chain reaction of growth and success. We have so much of something that it feels overwhelming. That's kind of what I want to talk about today. It's called the paradox of plenty, and it's pretty interesting. Imagine you're at a big buffet, and there's more food than you could ever eat in a lifetime. At first, it sounds amazing, right? But think about it. All that extra food might go to waste because people don't want to take too much. It's like having a closet full of clothes, but never wearing anything, because there's always something else to choose from. This happens in real life too. When we have too many options or resources, sometimes we end up not using them very well. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. You can't enjoy it properly when it's coming at you too fast. The same thing can happen with money, skills, or even time. We might feel guilty for not using everything we have, so we don't use any of it at all. It's a funny way that having too much can actually make us lose out on the good stuff. Does this sound familiar to you? Have you ever felt overwhelmed by choices or abundance before? We all use the same park or beach. It's nice to have those shared spaces, right? But here's the thing. When too many people rely on the same resource, it can get worn out quickly. Imagine a beautiful garden everyone tends together. At first, it flourishes. But soon, if each person takes just a little more than their fair share, the whole garden starts to suffer. The grass turns brown, flowers stop blooming, and maybe even trees fall down. This is kind of what happens with things we all use, like air or water or public lands. When we don't think about how our actions affect others who use the same resource, we might end up losing it altogether. It's like taking too much from a communal pot a euro. Eventually, there won't be enough left for anyone. This concept is called the tragedy of the commons. It reminds us that even though sharing sounds good, we need to be mindful of how we use things we all depend on. Maybe we could set limits or work together to keep these special places healthy for everyone. What do you think? Have you ever noticed this happening in your own community? We think doing what's best for us individually will lead to the best outcome overall? Well, there's this famous game called The Prisoner's Dilemma that shows just how tricky that thinking can be. Imagine you and I are caught breaking into a house, but the police only have enough evidence to convict one of us. They offer each of us a deal: confess and testify against the other, or stay silent. If we both confess, we'll both get lighter sentences than if we'd stayed quiet. But if one of us confesses while the other stays silent, the confessor gets off scot-free while the silent one gets the full punishment. Now, from our own perspective, it makes sense to confess a euro. After all, it's better than getting the worst punishment. But here's the thing. If we both think that way, we end up confessing, even though staying silent would have been better for both of us if we could have trusted each other. This game shows how our individual self-interest can sometimes lead to suboptimal outcomes when we don't consider how others might react. It's kind of like trying to find the shortest path through a maze blindfolded euro. We might think we're making the smart choice, but really we're just stumbling around. The prisoner's dilemma teaches us that sometimes what's best for all of us requires us to think about what's best for everyone else too. We marvel at how far technology has come. It's like watching a train chug along, leaving old stations behind while hurtling towards new ones. But here's the thing. As we speed ahead, we might find ourselves facing challenges we never imagined. Think of it like this. Imagine you've just moved into a smart home where everything's automated. At first, it's convenient a euro, lights turn on when you enter a room, the thermostat adjusts to your preferences. But what happens when the system starts making decisions on its own? Suddenly, you're not really in control anymore. That's kind of what's happening with technology. We're creating solutions that solve one problem, but often introduce new ones. It's like trying to catch a slippery fish a euro. We manage to grasp it, but our hands get wet in the process. The question is, are we ready to adapt to these changes? Can we learn to appreciate the beauty in imperfection, even as we strive for perfection through technology? We feel safer when we take risks. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually pretty common. Let me explain what I mean by that. Imagine you're at an amusement park, and there's this roller coaster that everyone's talking about. Some people might feel nervous about riding it because they think it could be scary or even dangerous. But others might feel drawn to it precisely because of those feelings. They might think, if everyone else is talking about how intense it is, maybe it's not that scary after all. This kind of thinking can actually make us more likely to take risks because we feel like we're proving something to ourselves or others. It's almost like a psychological game where our perception of risk becomes intertwined with our desire for excitement or validation. We might convince ourselves that we're safer because we understand the risks better, even when that's not necessarily true. It's a bit like trying to calm yourself down by telling yourself you're fine, but really, you're just getting more worked up. The paradox here is that the more we focus on perceived risks, the more we might actually increase our chances of encountering real dangers. It's a delicate balance between facing our fears and being smart about it. So next time you find yourself drawn to something that seems risky, take a moment to reflect on why you're feeling that way. Is it really excitement, or is it fear masquerading as courage? We worry that machines will take over all our jobs? Well, here's the thing. While automation does replace some lower-skilled positions, it actually creates more opportunities for skilled workers too. It's kind of like how a gardener uses tools to make their job easier a euro. The tools don't replace the gardener entirely, just allow them to focus on more delicate tasks. Think about it this way. When was the last time you went to a restaurant and saw a robot flipping burgers? Probably never. But what about the chef who carefully prepares each dish? That's the kind of work that requires skill and creativity. As technology advances, it frees up people from mundane tasks so they can focus on higher-level thinking and problem-solving. For instance, have you ever wondered how self-driving cars work? They need experts in computer vision, machine learning, and even ethics to design and program them safely. These aren't jobs that could be easily automated away. In fact, the rise of AI might push us towards more specialized, creative roles that we haven't even imagined yet. So instead of fearing robots taking our jobs, maybe we should see them as partners that help us grow and evolve in our careers. What do you think? As we ponder the paradox of growth, consider this. Economic expansion often brings progress, but it can also leave us breathless. You might imagine a tree growing rapidly, its branches stretching towards the sky, but forgetting to nourish its roots. Similarly, our pursuit of prosperity can lead us to forget about the very foundation we stand on a euro, our planet. Think of growth like a fire. It warms and lights our way, but if left unattended, it can consume everything in its path. We've seen this happen with deforestation, pollution, and climate change. The question is, how do we balance our desire for progress with our need for sustainability? Perhaps we can learn from nature's own cycles. Just as trees shed leaves in autumn to make room for new growth, maybe we need to let go of some of our old ways to make room for more sustainable practices. It's not about stopping growth entirely, but about growing smarter a euro, like a tree that bends with the wind rather than breaking under its weight. As we reflect on this paradox, remember that every choice we make has an impact. We can choose to see growth as a journey, not a destination. By doing so, we might find that progress and preservation aren't mutually exclusive, but complementary aspects of a harmonious whole. We think bigger is always better? Well, when it comes to businesses, that isn't always true. Larger companies often struggle with lower profit margins because they have to spread their resources so thin. It's like trying to make a big pot of soup a euro. You need more ingredients, but each spoonful might not be as flavorful. Imagine you're running a small bakery. You can focus on perfecting just a few recipes and selling them at a nice price. But if you grow too fast, you might start mass-producing cookies that aren't as delicious. That's what happens to many big companies a euro. They lose sight of what made them special in the first place, that it's kind of like when you learn to play the piano. At first, every note feels magical. But as you practice more, each note becomes familiar, and suddenly it's harder to feel that excitement. Big companies face a similar challenge a euro. They become so used to doing things a certain way that they forget why people love them in the first place. Does this make sense? It's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? But that's the paradox of scale a euro. Sometimes growing up doesn't mean getting stronger. We get so good at one thing that we forget how to do everything else. That's kind of what happens when we specialize too much. It's like being really great at playing chess, but forgetting how to play checkers. We become experts at our little corner of the world, but lose sight of the bigger picture. Imagine you're building a house. If everyone only does their own job and never helps anyone else, the whole project might take forever. But if people are willing to lend a hand now and then, things get done faster. It's not just about getting better at one skill. It's about understanding how all the pieces fit together. That I think this is especially true in technology. When we focus too much on one part of a system, we might create something brilliant, but it won't work well with anything else. It's like making a beautiful puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit anywhere. So maybe instead of specializing so deeply, we should try to understand a bit more of the whole picture. Not be experts at everything, but have a general idea of how things connect. That way, we can make progress faster and create things that actually work together. What do you think? Does that make sense? We feel like we have to keep investing time and effort into something just because we've already put so much into it. That's kind of what we're talking about with sunk costs. It's like throwing good money after bad, but instead of money, it's our time and energy. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've spent hours learning a new programming language, but now you realize it's not really what you want to do. You might feel like you have to keep going just because of all that time you've already put in. But here's the thing. Those hours you've already spent don't count anymore. What matters is where you're going next. So, take a deep breath and ask yourself if continuing down this path is still worth it to you. Remember, every decision we make shapes who we become, so choose wisely. We think that raising taxes would automatically bring in more money for the government. Well, it's not quite that simple. Imagine you own a lemonade stand, and suddenly the city decides to charge you more for each cup you sell. At first, you might think, great, I'll just raise my prices even more and make even more money. But here's the thing. People might start looking for cheaper alternatives, like making their own lemonade at home. Or they might decide to buy lemonade from a competitor who doesn't have to pay the extra fee. It's kind of like that with taxes too. When tax rates go up, some people might try to find ways to avoid paying them altogether, which could actually reduce the amount of money coming in for the government. It's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? The key is finding that sweet spot where people feel the tax burden is fair, but not so high that it discourages economic activity. It's all about balance, really. As you accumulate wealth, you might find yourself looking at money differently. It's like watching a beautiful sunset. At first, every color seems vibrant and exciting. But after a while, you start to notice the subtle shades and hues. Money becomes less about the thrill of acquisition and more about what it allows you to do. You might find yourself thinking about how much time and freedom it buys you, rather than just its face value. It's not that the money itself changes, but your relationship with it evolves. You start to see it as a tool, not an end goal. It's like having a key to unlock experiences and opportunities that were previously inaccessible. But here's the paradox. As wealth grows, so does the responsibility that comes with it. You might find yourself wondering how to use this newfound freedom wisely, balancing desires with what truly matters. It's a journey of self-discovery, really, learning to appreciate the value of money beyond just its monetary worth. We think that having more free time would make us more productive, But actually, it can be quite the opposite. Think of your mind like a garden. When it's constantly busy, it's like watering plants every day. They grow strong and healthy. But if you stop watering for a while, the plants might wilt. Your mind works similarly. When you're always on the go, you're constantly nurturing your ideas and projects. But when you have too much downtime, those seeds of creativity can wither away. It's not that you can't relax. You need rest just like plants do. The key is finding that sweet spot where you're giving yourself enough space to breathe, but still keeping those creative juices flowing. Remember, productivity isn't just about getting things done. It's also about growing and evolving as a person. So maybe instead of asking yourself, how can I work more efficiently? Try asking, what makes my work feel fulfilling? That shift in perspective might just help you find your perfect balance between work and play. As we stand here, surrounded by the marvels of modern technology, I want you to consider this thought. Every step forward often brings us closer to another challenge. It's like trying to reach a higher branch while balancing on a seesaw. We gain ground, but our center of gravity shifts too. Technology has given us incredible tools, hasn't it? We can connect with people across the world, access knowledge instantly, and create things that were once unimaginable. But have you ever stopped to think about what this means for our relationships? We're more connected than ever, yet sometimes I wonder if we've lost the art of truly being present with each other. Let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like you're constantly on, even when you're alone? Like there's always something buzzing in your pocket or glowing on your screen? That's what I mean. We've traded some of our most precious moments for the promise of connection and convenience. It's a trade-off we make every day, often without realizing it. Now, I'm not saying this is all bad. Technology has brought us so much good too. But it's worth taking a step back sometimes and asking ourselves, what are we gaining, and what might we be losing in the process? It's okay to slow down, look around, and appreciate where we are. After all, isn't that what makes life rich? Not just the destinations, but the journey itself? You see, trust is like a delicate flower. It needs care and attention to flourish. When we increase transparency, we're essentially pulling back the petals of this flower, letting everyone see its inner workings. While this might seem like a good thing, sometimes it can actually cause people to lose faith in the institution altogether. It's like watching a magician reveal his tricks. The magic disappears along with the mystery. Take governments, for instance. If every decision-making process is laid bare, citizens might start questioning whether the system truly serves them best. They might wonder if all this openness is just a way to keep them distracted while real power plays happen behind closed doors. But here's the thing. Sometimes a little mystery can be healthy. It allows us to have faith in the system without needing to know every detail. So, perhaps instead of revealing everything, we should focus on being more transparent about what really matters, our intentions and values. That way, we can build trust without losing the magic of the unknown. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? We think we've got a handle on things, but really we're just winging it? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. It's this funny thing called the paradox of uncertainty. See, when we try to predict the future, we often end up making decisions based on our best guesses rather than hard facts. It's like trying to navigate through fog with a flashlight. We might see a little ways ahead, but we're not really sure what's lurking just out of sight. For instance, imagine you're planning a road trip across the country. You check the weather forecast and pack accordingly, right? But what if the forecast was wrong? You might show up to your destination all dressed for rain when it turns out to be sunny instead, or vice versa. The point is, even with the best tools available, we can't always anticipate every twist and turn life throws our way. So maybe instead of relying so heavily on forecasts, we should focus more on being flexible and adaptable. After all, isn't that part of the fun of life anyway? Embracing the unknown and learning to roll with the punches? What do you think? Does that make sense to you? We focus so much on making others happy that we forget to check in with our own needs. It's like being a gardener who tends to everyone else's flowers but neglects their own. Creating value for others can be incredibly rewarding, but it's easy to get caught up in that feeling and lose sight of our own growth. Imagine you're baking cookies for a friend's party. The aroma fills the house, and everyone raves about your skills. But while you're basking in their praise, have you stopped to enjoy one yourself? It's not selfish to savor our own creations or accomplishments. In fact, It's necessary for maintaining our own sense of purpose and fulfillment. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. By taking time to appreciate your own efforts and growth, you're actually becoming a better gardener, more nourished, and able to nurture others even more effectively. So take a moment to pause, breathe deeply, and acknowledge the value you bring to yourself as well as others. Your own growth is just as important as the beauty you help create around you. We talk about money and how it's distributed among people. It's kind of like water flowing through a river. It moves smoothly when everyone gets enough, but when there are big rocks blocking the way, it starts to churn and create eddies. That's what happens when there's too much inequality in wealth distribution. On one hand, having more wealthy people can actually help drive economic growth because they have the means to invest and take risks. But on the other hand, when only a few have all the wealth, it creates a ripple effect that can slow down the whole economy. It's a bit like trying to build a house on shaky ground. No matter how beautiful the design, it won't stand strong if the foundation isn't solid. So, finding that balance between allowing for growth and ensuring fairness is key. It's not always easy, but it's worth thinking about, don't you think? We play games where one person wins and the other loses, like chess or rock, paper, scissors. Well, imagine if all of life was like that. That's kind of what economists mean when they talk about zero-sum games in economics. It sounds a bit scary, but stick with me here. In a zero-sum game, there's only so much pie to go around, and if one person gets a bigger slice, someone else has to get a smaller one. Sounds unfair, right? But here's the thing, real economies aren't really like that. They're more like a big pot of soup that keeps growing as people add ingredients. But sometimes, even though we want everyone to win, our actions can make things seem zero-sum. Think about it this way. If you're trying to be the best at your job and you work super hard to outdo your colleagues, it might feel like you're taking away from them. But really, you're probably just pushing everyone to do better overall. So, why does this matter? Well, if we start thinking everything is a zero-sum game, we might stop collaborating and sharing ideas. We might become so focused on winning that we forget how to work together towards something bigger than ourselves. And that could actually hurt us all in the long run. Does that make sense? It's a bit abstract, I know, but trust me, it's worth thinking about. We think that letting people make their own choices will always lead to the best outcome. Well, it turns out that isn't always true when it comes to markets. Imagine you're at a big potluck dinner, and everyone brings their favorite dish. Sounds great, right? But what if everyone decides to bring the same thing? Suddenly, you've got a table full of identical dishes, and no one gets to enjoy all the variety they were hoping for. This is kind of like what happens in markets when there's a market failure. It means that even though people are making choices based on what they want, the overall result isn't as good as it could be. This can happen because of things like external costs, like pollution, that aren't accounted for, or because people don't have all the information they need to make smart decisions. So while free markets are usually pretty good at getting things done, they're not perfect. Sometimes we need a little help from outside to make sure everything runs smoothly. We all chip in to buy something everyone wants, like a community garden or a public park. Well, that's basically what we call public goods. Now, here's the interesting part. When lots of people own something together, it can actually lead to less investment overall. Think of it like a big potluck dinner where everyone brings a dish. If everyone knows they'll get some food no matter what, they might not feel so motivated to bring their A game. It's like the old saying goes, if it's everyone's responsibility, it becomes no one's priority. This paradox can happen because when something belongs to everyone, we tend to think someone else will take care of it. It's kind of like assuming the road will always be paved just because it's public. But what if nobody bothered to fix potholes? Suddenly, we're all driving on bumpy roads. So, even though public goods sound great in theory, they can sometimes lead to underinvestment in practice. It's an important thing to keep in mind when deciding whether to make something public or private. We think having more stuff will make us happier. It's like collecting seashells on the beach. At first, each one feels special and unique. But after a while, they all start looking the same, and before long, you've got a bucket full of shells that don't bring you joy anymore. This is kind of what happens when we own things privately. We might feel good about owning them at first, but eventually, they lose their appeal. And yet, we keep buying more, hoping the next thing will be the one that finally makes us truly happy. It's almost like chasing a rainbow. No matter how far we run, it always stays just out of reach. The paradox here is that even though owning things sounds great in theory, in practice, it often leads to feeling empty rather than fulfilled. So maybe instead of focusing on accumulating stuff, we could try appreciating what we already have, or finding happiness in experiences rather than possessions. What do you think? Have you ever felt this way about something you owned? We do things without thinking about all the little costs involved, like driving a car without considering the wear and tear on the road, or working in a noisy office without realizing how it affects your hearing. Those are called externalities a euro, factors that affect things outside of a market transaction. They're like invisible costs that we often overlook. Imagine you're planning a picnic in a park. You bring a blanket, some food, and drinks. But have you ever thought about how much the park itself costs to build and maintain? Or how your presence affects the other people using the park? Those are externalities a euro. They affect others even if they're not directly involved in your picnic.in economics. These hidden costs can significantly impact market outcomes. For instance, pollution from factories can make the air unhealthy for everyone nearby, even if they don't buy anything from the factory. This pollution is an externality because it affects people outside of the market transaction between the factory and its customers. You might wonder, why should I care about these hidden costs? Well, consider this. If we all took responsibility for the full cost of our actions, we'd likely behave very differently. We might choose cleaner energy sources, drive less, or work in quieter offices. By accounting for externalities, we can create more sustainable and equitable markets. But here's the thing a euro, it's not always easy to measure these hidden costs. Sometimes they're hard to quantify, like the joy a park brings to people who visit it. And sometimes, even when we try to put a price on them, it's difficult to get everyone to agree on what that price should be. So, next time you're making a decision, take a moment to think about all the little costs involved a euro, not just the ones you see right away. You might be surprised at how your choices affect those around you, and how considering these hidden factors could lead to better outcomes for everyone. You see, when we try to fix problems with strict rules, sometimes we end up creating new ones. It's like trying to clean a messy room by throwing everything away a euro. Sure, it looks tidy now, but what have we lost? Take traffic laws, for instance. We put speed limits on roads to keep people safe. But did you ever notice how drivers tend to bunch up behind each other? It's almost as if they're all playing a game of follow the leader instead of watching out for themselves. This happens because the rules made us lose sight of our own judgment. It's not that rules don't have their place a euro. They do help us navigate unfamiliar territory. But sometimes, we forget that life isn't always about following the map to the letter. There's beauty in finding our own way, even if it means taking a few wrong turns along the way. The key is finding that balance between guidance and freedom. After all, life is a journey, not just a destination. We think taking away rules will set things free? Well, it's not always that simple. Imagine deregulating traffic laws a euro, suddenly everyone's driving however they want. Sounds liberating, right? But what if people start racing down the highway? That's kind of what happens when we remove too many regulations from markets. It might seem like we're giving businesses more freedom, but without some rules, they can get reckless. They might start taking bigger risks or cutting corners, which could lead to market instability. It's like removing the guardrails from a roller coaster a euro. Sure, it might feel exciting at first, but eventually, things could get out of control. The goal is usually to find the right balance between giving businesses room to grow and keeping everything stable. It's not about completely getting rid of rules, but about making sure they're smart and fair. So, when we talk about deregulation, let's remember that sometimes less isn't always more. We talk about putting all our eggs in one basket. Well, when it comes to power and decision-making, that's kind of what centralization does. It's like taking all the pieces of a puzzle and trying to fit them together under one big lid. On the surface, it might seem more efficient a euro, everything's in one place, easy to manage. But here's the thing, when power gets concentrated, it can be harder to keep track of who's doing what and why. It's like losing sight of your hands while you're clapping. Accountability becomes trickier because there's less transparency. Imagine being part of a big team project, but not knowing exactly whose ideas are behind each step. That's basically what happens when decisions get made by fewer people. Now, I'm not saying centralization always leads to problems, but it's worth thinking about. After all, wouldn't you want to know who's calling the shots in your life? We talk about making things more decentralized, like giving people more control over their own stuff. It sounds great on paper, but sometimes I wonder if it really works out that way. Let me tell you what I mean. Imagine you're organizing a big party. If one person was in charge of everything, they'd probably do a pretty good job, right? But now imagine everyone gets to decide who brings what dish. Sounds fair, but have you ever tried to coordinate a potluck? It's chaos. That's kind of what happens when we distribute power too much. We lose that clear direction and end up with a mess that I'm not saying we should all just let one person run things. That's not healthy either. The key is finding that sweet spot where we have enough freedom to make our own choices, but still work together smoothly. It's like finding the perfect recipe not too much structure, not too little. But here's the thing. Even when we think we've got it right, problems can still pop up. Take blockchain, for example. It's this fancy system where everyone agrees on rules without needing a central authority. Sounds great, but sometimes those rules can lead to some pretty weird outcomes. So what do we do? Well, I think we just have to keep trying. We need to experiment with different ways of organizing ourselves and see what works best. And remember, even when things get messy, we're still learning and growing. That's kind of the point of all this decentralization stuff, isn't it? What do you think about all this? Do you ever feel like we're losing our way in the process of gaining more control over our lives? We talk about globalization being this amazing thing that brings everyone closer together. Well, it's kind of like that, but also not quite. You see, on one hand, we're all connected now more than ever before. It's like we're all part of this big, messy family where everyone shares their toys and ideas. But on the other hand, sometimes I worry that we're losing some of our unique flavors along the way. Imagine you're walking through a big city, and suddenly you hear the same music playing everywhere, the same clothes people are wearing, even the same food trucks. It starts to feel a bit uniform, doesn't it? That's what some people call cultural homogenization, when different cultures start to blend together until they're almost indistinguishable. But here's the thing. Is that really so bad? Maybe our differences aren't as important as we think they are. After all, isn't variety what makes life interesting? And yet, sometimes I wonder if we're losing something special along the way, like a recipe passed down through generations, or a traditional dance that tells stories about where we come from. I guess the real question is, do we want to hold on to our unique flavors, or do we embrace this new global melting pot? It's a tricky balance to strike, isn't it? What do you think? Do you prefer your world to be full of sameness or diversity? You see, when we talk about localism and its impact on trade, it's kind of like trying to balance a seesaw. On one side, we have the idea of supporting our own community and keeping money close to home. It's like planting seeds in your backyard garden. You nurture them, watch them grow, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But on the other side, we have the reality of how this approach can sometimes create barriers. Imagine you're at a small town festival, and suddenly, people start putting up signs saying, "No outsiders allowed." That's essentially what happens when localism becomes too strict. Now, I'm not saying localism is bad. In fact, it can be quite beneficial when done right. Think of it like baking a cake. If you use ingredients from your local farm, you're supporting the community and getting fresher produce. But if you start telling everyone else they can't bring their own ingredients to the party, well, that's when things get tricky. The key is finding that sweet spot where we support our neighbors without shutting out the world. It's all about understanding that sometimes the best way to help ourselves is to open our arms to others who might have something valuable to offer. We talk about inflation being bad because it erodes our purchasing power. Well, there's actually another side to this coin. Imagine you're at a restaurant, and every year the prices go up slightly. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But over time, you start to notice that even though things cost more, people aren't earning any extra money. It's like the menu keeps growing, but no one's getting a raise. This is kind of what happens when we have stable inflation. Prices keep going up, but wages don't keep pace. It might seem good that prices aren't rising too fast, but really, it means people have less money to spend overall, and that can lead to economic stagnation. It's like the economy is stuck in neutral, even though everything costs more. So while stable inflation might sound nice, it can actually hold us back from growing and thriving. Does that make sense? We feel good when prices drop, like when our favorite coffee shop lowers its prices and suddenly we can afford that extra latte every day. Well, Deflation works kind of like that, but on a much bigger scale. It's when prices for goods and services fall across an entire economy over time. At first glance, it might seem great a euro. Who doesn't love saving money? But here's the thing. When everything costs less, people often spend less too. Imagine you're at a yard sale and everything is half price. You might be tempted to buy more because things seem cheaper, but actually, you might just end up taking home less overall. That's kind of what happens in a deflated economy. People hold on to their money instead of spending it, which can slow down businesses and even hurt jobs. It's a bit like trying to save money by not buying anything at all a euro. It defeats the purpose. And that's why economists often worry about deflation a euro. It can create this cycle where prices keep dropping, but people stop buying, and before long, everyone's stuck with nothing but savings accounts full of cash. It's a tricky situation that requires careful balance. We talk about money and jobs like they're separate things. Well, there's this interesting paradox where lowering interest rates can actually lead to higher unemployment. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Let me explain it in simple terms. Imagine you're running a small business and you need money to grow. When interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper. Sounds good, doesn't it? But here's the thing. When everyone can borrow easily, some people might take on more debt than they can handle. This can lead to financial stress and even bankruptcy for some businesses. As a result, companies might become more cautious about hiring new employees. It's like trying to build a house on shaky ground. Eventually, it might collapse under its own weight. So, while lower interest rates seem like they should help create jobs, they can sometimes have the opposite effect. It's a reminder that economics isn't always straightforward, and what seems logical on paper might not play out in reality. Does that make sense? We try to fix one problem, but end up creating another? That's kind of what's happening with quantitative easing. It's like trying to put out a fire by pouring more gasoline on it. Central banks are injecting all this extra money into the economy, hoping to stimulate growth. But instead of trickling down to help regular folks, it seems to be inflating asset bubbles. Imagine taking a small balloon and blowing air into it until it gets too big and bursts. That's what's happening with housing markets and stock prices. They're getting so inflated that when they do burst, it could cause even bigger problems than before. It's a bit like playing with fire, isn't it? We're not sure exactly how it'll all play out, but we do know that eventually, these bubbles will pop. The question is, will we be ready for it? You try to control things, but end up losing grip? That's kind of what happens with monetary policy and inflation. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the US, use tools like interest rates to guide the economy. It's like trying to steer a big ship a euro. You make adjustments, hoping to reach your destination smoothly. But here's the thing. The economy is complex, like a living creature. Sometimes it responds differently than expected. Inflation, which is like the temperature of the economic weather, can get out of hand despite the best efforts. Imagine you're trying to cool down a room with air conditioning, but the sun keeps shining through the windows, making it harder to regulate the temperature. It's not that the central bankers aren't smart or capable. They're just dealing with forces beyond their direct control. The question is, how do we balance the need for economic growth with keeping prices stable? It's a delicate dance, really. And sometimes, even with all their expertise, they might struggle to keep everything in perfect harmony. But that doesn't mean they've failed entirely. It's more like, well, have you ever tried to grow a garden? You water it, give it sunlight, and hope for the best. Sometimes it flourishes beautifully, other times it needs more attention. That's kind of what monetary policy is a euro, nurturing the economy day after day. We talk about money and economics. Well, there's this interesting thing called the paradox of fiscal policy. It's kind of like when you decide to clean your room, but in a bigger way. The government is trying to help the economy grow by spending more money, right? But here's the thing. Sometimes this extra spending can actually push out private investors who are planning to do similar projects. It's like inviting friends over for dinner, but then realizing you've run out of space for all their stuff. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're a small business owner, saving up to open a new store. The government comes along and decides to build a big new road near your planned location. Now, suddenly people might be more interested in driving around instead of shopping locally. Your business idea gets pushed aside because of this new project. That's basically what's happening with crowding out. But here's the thing, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes government spending can actually boost private investment if it creates jobs or improves infrastructure. It's like adding a new room to your house. Sometimes it makes the whole place more attractive to live in. The key is finding the right balance. Too much government spending and not enough private investment can be problematic, but just the right amount can really help things grow. It's all about finding that sweet spot where both public and private efforts work together smoothly. You see, debt is kind of like borrowing money from a friend. It can be helpful when you need it, but it's not always easy to pay back. When countries borrow money, it can help them grow and develop, much like how taking out a loan might allow you to start a business. But just as you have to be careful not to accumulate too much debt, countries do too. If they borrow too much, they become vulnerable to economic changes. Imagine you borrowed $10,000 to buy a house, but then lost your job. That's similar to what happens when countries struggle to repay their debts. They might have to make tough choices, like cutting public services or raising taxes. So while debt isn't inherently bad, it's important to use it wisely and remember that you'll eventually have to pay it back. Just like how you'd be careful not to borrow more than you can afford, countries should too. It's all about finding that balance between growth and stability. You see, leverage is like a double-edged sword in finance. It can magnify your returns, but also multiply your risks. Imagine holding a seesaw. When one side goes up, the other comes down. Leverage works similarly. A small gain can quickly become a big win, but a small loss can turn into a substantial loss. It's like standing on tiptoes. You might reach higher, but you're also more vulnerable to falling. Consider this. A stock trader uses borrowed money to buy more shares. If the market rises, they profit handsomely. But if it falls, they lose not just their initial investment, but the borrowed funds too. It's a delicate balance, really. Leverage can be powerful, but it demands careful handling. As with any tool, understanding its nature is key to using it wisely. We think spreading our investments out across different areas will make us safer. It's kind of like planting seeds in many different pots, hoping some will grow while others might not do so well. But here's the thing. Sometimes those seeds can all be affected by the same weather patterns. In investing, this means that even though we've diversified our portfolio, certain events can still impact multiple assets simultaneously. Let me give you an example. Imagine you have stocks in tech companies, real estate, and agriculture. On paper, these seem very different. But what if there was a severe drought affecting crops worldwide? Suddenly, your agricultural investments are struggling. But guess what? The tech companies might also be impacted because they rely on those crops for components or supply chains. And don't forget, real estate values could drop due to economic instability caused by the drought. This is what we mean by correlated risks. Just because we've spread our investments out doesn't necessarily mean we're protected from all risks. Sometimes, those risks can be connected in ways we didn't anticipate. So, while diversification is still a good strategy overall, it's important to remember that it's not a magic shield against all market fluctuations. We need to stay informed and adapt our strategies as needed. Things seem connected even when they aren't. That's kind of what we're talking about here. It's called the paradox of correlation. Let me explain it in a way that might make sense to you. Imagine you're at a party and you notice that every time the host laughs, the music changes. At first, you might think there's some secret signal going on between them, but then you realize it's just coincidence. The host laughs because something funny happens, and someone nearby changes the music because they want to keep the mood light. That's kind of like what we see in markets sometimes. Two unrelated events happen at the same time, and people start thinking there must be some connection between them. It's like seeing two friends running into each other on the street and assuming they planned it. But really, they were just going different directions and happened to cross paths. This can lead people to make decisions based on false assumptions. It's like trying to predict the weather by watching birds fly a euro. It might seem connected, but it isn't. Markets are complex systems with many moving parts, and sometimes things just line up by chance. So next time you hear about how the market reacted to this news, take a step back and ask yourself if there's really a connection there, or if it's just a coincidence waiting to be explained away. Remember, correlation doesn't always mean causation. Markets seem to be all over the place, like a roller coaster ride without warning. That's what we mean by volatility. Now, you might think that more ups and downs would make people bolder, but surprisingly, it often does the opposite. It's kind of like when you're on a seesaw a euro, the bigger the swings, the more cautious you become. Think about it this way. Imagine you're at an amusement park on a busy day. The lines for rides are long, but people are still eager to hop on. That's what we call a stable market. But now picture the same park during a thunderstorm, dark skies, loud thunder, people running for shelter. That's what happens when volatility increases. People become risk-averse, like they're holding onto their wallets tightly. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? More movement in the market usually means people become less willing to take risks. It's like when you're trying to learn a new skill, too many obstacles can discourage you from even starting. Similarly, in finance, increased volatility can make investors hesitant to invest, even though it might seem like there are more opportunities out there. It's a delicate balance, really. Markets seem to be moving smoothly, like water flowing down a stream. That's what we often call easy trading conditions. But here's the thing. Just because things feel calm on the surface doesn't mean there aren't powerful currents beneath. In fact, this very ease can sometimes set us up for unexpected turbulence. Think of it like a still pond on a summer day. The water looks peaceful, but beneath the surface, tiny ripples are building. As more and more traders jump in, thinking everything is fine, these small movements start to gain momentum. Before long, what seemed like a tranquil scene turns into a choppy storm. It's not that the conditions were inherently bad. It's just that our perception of them was misleading. This paradox of liquidity, where easy trading leads to market crashes, is a reminder that even in seemingly stable times, caution is always warranted. Just as you wouldn't assume a snake isn't venomous just because it's not actively hissing, we shouldn't take market stability for granted. Remember, the calm before the storm is exactly when we need to be most vigilant. We try to predict what might happen next, like when you're planning a trip and trying to guess the weather. Well, when people do this with markets, it's called speculation. It's kind of like trying to read tea leaves. We think we see patterns, but really, we're just making educated guesses. Here's the thing. When lots of people start speculating about a market trend, it can actually change how things play out. It's a bit like trying to herd cats. The more people watching, the more likely the cats are to behave differently than usual. This creates a sort of feedback loop where our predictions shape the very thing we're trying to predict. For instance, imagine you're at a party and everyone starts talking about how great the music is. Suddenly, the DJ notices all these happy faces and decides to play even more upbeat songs. That's basically what happens in markets when we speculate too much. We create the very outcome we were hoping for, but often in unexpected ways. While speculation can be useful for getting a sense of things to come, it's important to remember that we're not always seeing reality clearly. Sometimes, it's better to simply enjoy the journey rather than trying to control every step along the way. After all, life is full of surprises, and markets are no exception. You spot a great deal on a product you've been eyeing? That feeling of excitement and satisfaction when you snag something at a discount? Well, imagine if traders could do that all day long, every day, across entire markets. That's essentially what arbitrage is, finding those hidden gems where prices differ between two places. But here's the thing. While it sounds like a surefire way to make money, it can actually create more problems than it solves. Think of it like trying to drink from a fire hose, You might get some water, but you're also likely to get soaked. In finance, this constant chasing after price discrepancies can lead to market inefficiencies. It's a bit like trying to catch a greased pig at the county fair, You might manage to grab hold for a second, but ultimately, you're just spreading yourself thin. And that's exactly what happens when traders keep jumping from one arbitrage opportunity to the next. They create more noise in the system, making it harder for genuine value to shine through. So while arbitrage might seem like a clever trick, it's actually part of a larger dance where markets constantly adjust and rebalance themselves. You know how we often try to protect ourselves from life's uncertainties? Like putting on a warm coat when winter comes, or having a backup plan for our dreams. Well, sometimes those very efforts can end up exposing us to more risks than we bargained for. It's a bit like trying to hold water in your hands, The harder you squeeze, the more likely it is to slip right through. Think of it this way. Imagine you're a farmer growing crops. To guard against drought, you might invest heavily in irrigation systems. But what if a flood comes instead? All that money spent on protection could leave you vulnerable to exactly what you were trying to avoid. It's a delicate balance, isn't it? This paradox of hedging shows us that sometimes our attempts to secure ourselves can create new vulnerabilities. It's not always easy to see coming. but being aware of this possibility can help us approach risk management with a wiser eye. After all, life is full of unexpected twists and turns a euro. Perhaps the key is learning to bend with them rather than trying to control every step of the journey. You see, when we talk about derivatives in finance, it's a bit like playing with fire. On one hand, these instruments can be incredibly useful for spreading risk around. Imagine you're a farmer who planted a crop expecting high prices, but now the weather forecast looks grim. You could sell futures contracts to lock in today's price, protecting yourself from potential losses. It's like hedging your bets. But here's the thing. While this can help manage risk, it can also create new vulnerabilities. Think of it like building a house of cards. Each derivative adds another layer of complexity, making it harder to predict how everything will fall if things go wrong. And sometimes, even small changes in market conditions can cause the whole structure to come crashing down. For instance, during the 2008 financial crisis, many banks had invested heavily in mortgage-backed securities. These were essentially complex derivatives tied to housing prices. When the housing market collapsed, it triggered a chain reaction that brought down entire financial institutions. It was like watching a domino effect unfold before our eyes. While derivatives can be powerful tools for managing risk, they also require great care and understanding. It's a delicate balance between protection and potential disaster. As we navigate this complex world of finance, it's important to remember that even with all our clever instruments, we're still dealing with human emotions and unpredictable events. Always keep that in mind when you're playing with fire. We trust certain experts to give us an honest opinion, like when you get a credit score from one of those big rating agencies. They're supposed to be impartial, right? But here's the thing. Even though they claim to be objective, there are often hidden conflicts of interest that can skew their ratings. Imagine you're trying to buy a house, and you need a good credit score to qualify for a mortgage. The rating agency might seem neutral, but what if they also happen to offer consulting services to banks? Suddenly, giving you a lower rating could mean more business for them. It's like having a referee who also gets paid by one of the teams playing the game. This isn't just theoretical a euro, it's happened before. In fact, during the financial crisis, many rating agencies gave risky mortgages top marks, which ended up causing huge problems. It was like they were wearing rose-tinted glasses while everyone else saw the storm clouds gathering. The next time you see those letters after your credit score, like a plus or B, remember that behind the scenes, there might be more going on than meets the eye. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's worth keeping in mind when making important decisions based on those ratings. After all, wouldn't it be nice if we could always trust that everything we're told is completely unbiased? We try to fix one problem, but end up creating another? That's kind of what happens with financial regulations. On the surface, stricter rules seem like a good idea. We want to protect people from getting taken advantage of, right? But here's the thing. When we make things too complicated, it can actually create opportunities for smart folks to find ways around the system. It's like trying to build a fence to keep out predators, but accidentally creating a maze that only the cleverest animals can navigate. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're trying to regulate a busy highway. You put up more and more signs, until drivers are so confused they start relying on GPS instead of their own judgment. Suddenly, the real danger isn't speeding cars anymore, but people glued to their screens while driving. That's kind of what can happen with financial regulations. We might think we're making things safer, but really we're just pushing the risk somewhere else. The question becomes, how do we strike a balance between protecting people and giving them the freedom to make their own choices? It's not an easy puzzle to solve, but maybe the key is to focus on clear, simple rules that everyone can understand. After all, sometimes less really is more. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? We rely on unofficial networks to get things done, like borrowing money from friends or family when we're short on cash. Well, in the world of finance, there's this thing called shadow banking that works kind of like that. It's when regular people lend and borrow money outside of official banks, often through complex financial instruments. Imagine you're at a big party, and everyone's chatting and sharing drinks. That's sort of what shadow banking feels like. Lots of people swapping money and promises, but not always following the rules. Now, while this might seem harmless, it can actually create big problems. Think of it like a game of musical chairs, but instead of chairs, it's financial institutions passing around risky loans. If too many people lose their seats or default on their loans, The whole system could come crashing down. The thing is, shadow banking has become so common that some experts worry it's becoming too big to control. It's like trying to herd cats a euro. You think you've got everything under wraps, but suddenly one slips away and causes chaos. So, while shadow banking might seem like a quick fix for financial troubles, it's important to remember that it's playing with fire. We need to find ways to make our financial system safer, not riskier. You know how people often talk about cryptocurrencies being decentralized? It's kind of like a big potluck dinner where everyone brings their own dish. But here's the thing. Just because everyone's bringing something doesn't mean it all ends up evenly distributed. Sometimes, a few people might bring really fancy dishes that end up getting more attention. That's kind of what's happening with cryptocurrencies. On paper, they seem super fair and equal, but in reality, wealth tends to concentrate in certain hands. It's like watching a beautiful sunset in Euro. It looks perfect from afar, but when you zoom in, you notice some clouds casting long shadows. Cryptocurrencies have this paradoxical quality where they promise freedom and equality, but sometimes they end up creating new inequalities. For instance, imagine if Bitcoin was like a big jar of cookies. Everyone could reach in and grab one. But over time, some people might find ways to get 2 or 3 cookies while others only manage one. That's not exactly what we'd call fair, is it? It's a reminder that even in the digital age, old patterns of wealth concentration can sneak up on us in surprising ways. You see, blockchain technology is quite fascinating, isn't it? It's like a digital ledger book that keeps track of everything happening within its network. But here's the thing. While it's meant to be super transparent, it can sometimes raise questions about our privacy. Imagine you're sharing a diary with all your friends a euro. It might feel liberating at first, but eventually, you might wonder who else is reading it. With blockchain, every transaction is recorded for everyone to see. It's like putting all your thoughts and actions on social media a euro. It's public knowledge. Now, this isn't necessarily bad, but it does mean we have to be careful about what we share. Let me ask you this. Have you ever shared something online that you later regretted? Blockchain works similarly, but instead of just your thoughts, it's recording financial transactions and other personal information. It's a trade-off between security and privacy, really. We get the benefits of transparency, but we have to be mindful of what we're making public. You see, fintech is like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's bringing revolutionary changes to how we handle money and transactions. Imagine being able to send cash across borders instantly, or having a bank account in your pocket. It sounds magical, doesn't it? But here's the thing. While all this innovation is happening, there's a risk of leaving some people behind. It's like building a beautiful new highway, but forgetting to pave the roads leading to it. Let me put it this way. Fintech is making banking more accessible than ever before. You can now open an account online, transfer money with just a tap, and even borrow loans through apps. Sounds great, right? But what about those who don't have smartphones or stable internet connections? They might feel left out of this digital revolution. It's a bit like having a fancy new restaurant open in town, but forgetting that not everyone can afford to dine there. Now, I'm not saying fintech is bad. Far from it. It's just that we need to be careful not to let our excitement cloud our judgment. We should make sure that as we leap forward into this brave new world of finance, we're not creating a whole new class of excluded individuals. It's a delicate balance, isn't it? We want progress, but we also want to ensure no one gets left behind in the process. What do you think? Am I making sense, or am I just getting too caught up in my own thoughts? You see, the efficient market hypothesis and behavioral finance are two sides of the same coin when it comes to understanding how markets work. Imagine you're at a bustling market square, surrounded by people buying and selling goods. The efficient market hypothesis suggests that all this activity creates a perfect price for everything, reflecting all available information. It's like the market is a big, wise oracle, always knowing exactly what things are worth. But behavioral finance takes a different view. It says that people aren't always rational in their decisions, and that emotions and biases play a big role. Think of it like trying to predict the weather based on people's moods a euro, sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy. This approach recognizes that we humans aren't always logical, and our actions in the market reflect that. For instance, have you ever noticed how stock prices can drop suddenly even when nothing bad has happened? That might be because investors got spooked by rumors or news that wasn't entirely accurate. Behavioral finance would say this is a great example of how emotions can drive market behavior, rather than just cold, hard facts. So, which one is right? Well, maybe both are. After all, markets are made up of people, and people are complicated creatures. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between a mix of wisdom and whimsy, like a beautiful tapestry woven from threads of reason and emotion. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? Life seems perfectly balanced, but then suddenly everything shifts? That's kind of what happened with the stock market crash of 1929. It was like a beautiful house of cards that everyone thought was sturdy, but turned out to be fragile. People were buying stocks left and right, thinking they'd make easy money, just like magic. But behind closed doors, many companies weren't doing well financially. Imagine you're building a tower with blocks, but secretly some of them are hollow. If you keep adding more blocks, eventually the whole thing comes crashing down. Now, here's an interesting part. Did you ever hear of Black Tuesday? It was October 29th, 1929, when panic selling hit Wall Street. Picture this: people rushing to sell their stocks, frantically trying to get rid of them before prices dropped even further. It was like a big game of musical chairs, but instead of chairs, it was stocks, and when the music stopped, many people found themselves without a seat. The crash led to the Great Depression, which lasted over a decade. It was a harsh reminder that even in the best of times, there's always a risk involved when we play with money. We talk about money, but really we mean power? Well, cryptocurrency is kind of like that, but instead of being controlled by governments or banks, it's more like digital cash that lives on computers all around the world. It's like having a secret handshake that works anywhere, anytime. Imagine you're at a big party, and everyone's talking about this new game where you trade colorful coins. That's basically what cryptocurrency is. People trading these digital coins, hoping they'll be worth more later. But here's the thing, just like how you might lose at that game, there's always a risk when playing with cryptocurrency. Some people make a lot of money, while others lose everything. That it's interesting because it challenges the way we think about money and who should control it. It's like a rebellious teenager trying to prove a point. It's not always easy to understand, but it's definitely making us rethink our assumptions about finance. And you know what? Sometimes change can be good, even if it feels scary at first. Life feels like a roller coaster? Well, imagine that same feeling but stretched out over years. That's kind of what happened with the housing bubble back in 2008. It was like this big storm cloud gathering on the horizon, and before anyone knew it, it had burst open and was pouring down rain all over the economy. Picture this: people buying houses they couldn't afford, banks lending money they shouldn't have, and everyone thinking house prices would keep going up forever. It was like a big game of musical chairs, except instead of chairs, it was homes. And when the music stopped, a lot of people found themselves standing alone, holding worthless pieces of paper. Now, here's the thing. We often talk about bubbles bursting as sudden events, but really, they're more like slow-motion car crashes. You see the warning signs the dented fender, the screeching tires but it takes a while to realize you're headed straight for the wall. In this case, the crash was so big it shook the whole country. As I reflect on it now, I wonder, what if we'd seen it coming? Would we have been able to avoid all this pain? It's a reminder that even when things seem perfect on the surface, there can be hidden currents beneath the water. But here's the thing, we've learned from it. We're better at spotting these storms now, and that's something to feel good about. So the next time you hear someone talking about the housing market, remember this story. It's a reminder that even in the calmest of times, there can be turbulence just beneath the surface. But also remember this, we've been through tough times before, and we always come out stronger on the other side. That's something to hold on to, isn't it? Life feels like a puzzle we're trying to piece together. That's kind of what economics is like too. It's this vast, complex system that we're all part of, but we don't always understand fully. Imagine you're standing on a beach watching waves roll in a euro. Each wave represents money coming and going, shaping our world in its own way. Now, economists try to study these waves, figure out patterns, and predict how they'll behave. But here's the thing, economics is also a bit like trying to grasp sand in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips away. That's why economists often seem contradictory or confusing. They're dealing with something inherently slippery. They might say one thing today and the opposite tomorrow, depending on how the waves are behaving. It's not that they're being inconsistent. It's just that the subject itself is full of paradoxes, like how we need money to survive, but too much of it can ruin us, or how growth can be good, but also lead to inequality. Economics isn't always easy to wrap your head around, but that's partly what makes it so fascinating. It's this constant dance between logic and uncertainty, between what we think we know and what we're still discovering. And you know what? I think that's kind of beautiful. We feel like saving money is the safest thing to do when things seem uncertain. It's like holding onto a life jacket while the ship is sinking a euro. It feels secure, but it might not actually keep us afloat. The paradox of thrift suggests that being too frugal during economic downturns can actually make things worse. Think of it like trying to save water in a leaky bucket a euro. No matter how hard you squeeze, you'll still lose more than you gain. Instead of hoarding cash, maybe consider investing in yourself or supporting local businesses. It's not about throwing caution to the wind, but about finding balance. Remember, even small acts of kindness or investment can ripple out and create positive change. So next time you're tempted to tighten your purse strings, take a step back and wonder, what would happen if I used this money to lift others up instead? We think that making things more efficient will automatically lead to better outcomes. Well, there's this interesting paradox called the Jevons paradox that challenges that idea. It suggests that increased efficiency often leads to higher consumption, not lower. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you have a leaky faucet, and you fix it so water stops dripping everywhere. At first, it seems great because you're saving water, but over time, you might find yourself taking longer showers or washing your car more frequently. This is kind of like what happens when we make things more efficient a euro. We start using them more because they're easier and cheaper. For instance, let's talk about energy efficiency. When cars became more fuel efficient, people drove more miles overall. Or consider computers a euro. They've gotten so fast now that we use them for all sorts of tasks we never did before, which means we end up using them more hours per day. That it's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? We'd expect that making things more efficient would lead to less usage, but instead, we often see the opposite happen. This paradox reminds us that human behavior is complicated, and just making things more efficient isn't always enough to solve our problems. It's a good reminder to think carefully about how changes in efficiency might affect our habits and overall impact. We marvel at how far technology has come. It's amazing what we can do now compared to just a few decades ago. But have you ever stopped to think about why services still cost so much despite all these advancements? This is actually a pretty interesting phenomenon called Baumol's cost disease. Imagine you're at a fancy restaurant, and you notice the waitstaff seems to be doing less work than they used to. They're not running around as much, but your bill is still just as high. This is kind of like what's happening with many service industries. The problem is, while manufacturing has gotten so efficient that one person can produce way more than they could before, services often can't be automated quite as easily. For example, teaching is a service. No matter how advanced technology gets, you still need a real person to teach kids. And that person needs to be paid, just like they did back when schools were smaller. So even though we've made huge strides in education technology, teachers' salaries haven't necessarily gone down. It's a bit like trying to make a car cheaper by just removing the engine a euro. It doesn't quite work that way. Now, don't get me wrong, technology has definitely helped some service industries become more efficient. But for many others, especially those involving human interaction or creativity, progress hasn't led to the same kind of cost savings we see in manufacturing. It's almost as if these industries have their own pace of progress, separate from the rest of the economy. This idea challenges our intuition about how things should work. We expect that as technology improves, costs should come down. But Baumol's cost disease shows us that sometimes, even when we're making huge leaps forward, certain parts of our lives remain stubbornly expensive simply because of who we are, a euro, humans interacting with each other. It's a reminder that not everything can be solved by machines or gadgets alone. Things we think are worthless turn out to be incredibly valuable later. It's like finding a rare coin in your grandfather's attic. At first, it just looks like a weird old thing, but then you learn it's worth thousands. This happens all the time in life, doesn't it? Take art, for instance. When Van Gogh was alive, his paintings were barely worth anything. But now, they're worth millions. It's as if time has given them a special kind of magic. But why does this happen? Is it because we've just gotten smarter and can appreciate beauty more now? Or is there something deeper going on? Maybe it's that these things have stood the test of time. They've survived wars, economic crashes, and all sorts of changes. They've proven themselves to be truly valuable over and over again. You see, value isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about how something makes us feel, comforted, inspired, connected to our past. And sometimes it's about how something challenges our thinking or helps us see the world differently. So maybe what becomes valuable over time isn't just things themselves, but the stories they tell us about ourselves and where we've been. What do you think? Does anything come to mind that you thought was worthless once, but turn out to be incredibly valuable later? We think that having more money will make us happier? Well, there's this interesting thing called the Easterlin paradox that challenges that idea. It suggests that once our basic needs are met, extra money doesn't necessarily lead to more happiness. Think of it like filling up a glass. At first, each new sip brings joy, but eventually, no matter how full the glass gets, that initial satisfaction wears off. It's kind of like buying a new car. At first, driving it feels amazing, but after a while, you start to notice all the little things that aren't perfect about it. Or imagine having a beautiful house, but then you realize how much work goes into keeping it clean and maintained. These experiences remind us that true happiness often comes from within and from meaningful relationships, not just from accumulating stuff. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, have you ever known someone who had everything they could possibly want, but still seemed unfulfilled? That's basically what the Easterlin paradox is saying, that beyond a certain point, more money doesn't automatically equal more happiness. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it's definitely worth considering when we're thinking about what truly makes us happy in life. You walk into a store and feel overwhelmed by all the choices? Like, you're trying to pick out a new pair of shoes, but there are so many styles and colors it makes your head spin. That's what psychologists call the paradox of choice. It's like being in a big library where every book looks interesting, but you can't decide which one to read first. Imagine you're at a restaurant menu that goes on for pages. Every dish sounds delicious, but how do you choose? That's what happens when we have too many options. Our brains get confused and start to freeze up. We might end up not choosing anything at all, or worse, making a decision we'll regret later. That's funny, isn't it? We think having more choices would make us happier, but sometimes it does the opposite. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. Too much of a good thing can be overwhelming. So next time you're faced with a lot of choices, maybe try narrowing things down first. Ask yourself what's really important to you, and go from there. Sometimes less is more, you know? Here's a paragraph addressing the topic, the siren song of high-yield investments. Risky but alluring, based on your requirements. You see a beautiful sunset and feel drawn to it, even though you know it might be fleeting. That's kind of what high-yield investments can feel like. They promise big returns, like a treasure chest overflowing with gold coins. But just as the sunset can hide storms brewing on the horizon, these investments often come with risks we don't always see clearly. It's like chasing after fireflies on a summer night. They light up bright, but disappear quickly when you try to catch them. The question is, are those brief moments of brilliance worth the risk of getting burned? Consider this. Imagine planting a seed that promises to grow into a towering tree overnight. It sounds magical, but we know that real growth takes time and care. High-yield investments might seem like that overnight miracle, but often they require patience and understanding of the underlying landscape. So, before you reach for that shiny apple, remember to check if it's really worth the risk of losing your hand. Life feels like walking a tightrope. That's kind of what risk management is all about. It's finding ways to balance our desire for security with the need to take chances and grow. Think of it like sailing a boat through treacherous waters. You need to be brave enough to chart your own course, but also smart enough to read the signs and adjust your route when necessary. Risk management isn't about eliminating all risks. That would mean staying anchored in one place, but about understanding them well enough to navigate around them. It's about being prepared for unexpected storms while still enjoying the journey. For instance, imagine you're planning a road trip. You could spend all your time worrying about every possible car breakdown or traffic jam, or you could research reliable cars, pack a roadside emergency kit, and leave some extra time for unexpected delays. That way, you can enjoy the view while still being ready for whatever comes your way. We try to spread our investments across many different assets. That's diversification. It's like planting seeds in many different pots, hoping some will grow strong and healthy. The idea is that if one area struggles, others can help balance things out. But concentration is the opposite approach. It's like focusing all your energy on nurturing just a few special plants, believing they'll thrive and provide the best results. This strategy relies on choosing wisely, picking assets you truly believe in. Both approaches have their merits. Diversification can protect against major setbacks, but it might mean missing out on extraordinary growth in specific areas. Concentration could lead to higher rewards if your chosen investments flourish, but it also risks significant losses if things don't go as planned. The key is finding a balance that works for you. It's like deciding how many different types of flowers to plant in your garden a year. Too few, and it might be vulnerable to pests or weather changes. Too many, and you might dilute the beauty and impact of each bloom. The right mix depends on your risk tolerance, investment goals, and personal preferences. Experts seem to struggle when faced with a completely new challenge. It's almost as if they've forgotten what it's like to be a beginner. This paradoxical situation highlights an interesting dynamic in skill development. Imagine you're learning to play chess. At first, every move feels like a revelation, and you progress rapidly. But as you become more experienced, each decision becomes more complex, weighing countless possibilities. The expert might overthink, while the novice might make instinctual moves that surprisingly work. This phenomenon isn't unique to chess. In many fields, from music to mathematics, we see this pattern. The expert's mind, once a powerful tool, can now be a hindrance. They might analyze too deeply, forgetting the simplicity that once served them well. It's as if they've lost touch with their inner beginner. So, the next time you find yourself struggling despite years of practice, remember that it's okay. Your expertise doesn't define your ability to learn or grow. In fact, embracing your beginner's mindset might just be the key to unlocking new levels of understanding and innovation. You see, our minds are like intricate puzzle boxes, capable of solving complex problems one piece at a time. But sometimes, we find ourselves stuck on a particular challenge, unable to see the bigger picture. This is what economists call the paradox of bounded rationality the idea that while we strive for perfect decision-making, our brains have limitations that can lead us astray. Imagine trying to navigate a dense forest without a map. You might make good progress at first, but eventually, you'll start to feel lost and uncertain. That's kind of how our brains work when faced with too many choices or incomplete information. We try our best, but we can't always see the full path ahead. It's not that we're irrational. It's just that our minds have built-in shortcuts that help us function efficiently, but can also lead to mistakes. For instance, think about buying groceries. On autopilot, you might grab the same old items every week without really thinking about whether you need them. This isn't laziness. It's your brain's way of saving mental energy. The key is recognizing these patterns and occasionally taking a step back to reassess. By acknowledging these limitations, we can learn to make better decisions and navigate life's complexities with greater ease. We do things just because everyone else is doing them? That's social proof in action. It's like being part of a big herd of sheep, moving together without really thinking. In finance, this can be tricky. Let's say you're considering investing in a new tech company. If all your friends are jumping on the bandwagon, it might feel safer to join them. But here's the thing. Just because the crowd is doing something doesn't mean it's right for you. Think of it like trying to fit into a pair of shoes that don't quite match. Just because everyone around you looks comfortable doesn't mean you'll be happy wearing them. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how sometimes what seems popular isn't actually the best choice? Like when everyone wants to eat at that trendy new restaurant, but you find out later it wasn't that great after all. That's social proof in action. It's like following a map that leads you astray because everyone else is using it. The key is to remember that just because many people are doing something doesn't make it true or right for you. Your financial decisions should be based on what makes sense for you, not what everyone else is doing. So next time you're considering a big financial move, take a step back and think, is this really what I want? Or am I just following the crowd? We hold on to things so tightly because we're afraid of losing them. That's what psychologists call loss aversion. It's like being afraid of falling off a cliff more than you're excited about flying. We often prefer avoiding a bad outcome over getting a good one. Imagine you have a choice between a sure $100 bill or a 50% chance of winning $200. Most people would choose the sure thing. But here's the thing. This fear can be both helpful and harmful. It keeps us safe from risks, but it can also stop us from taking chances that could lead to amazing rewards. Think about it like this. Sometimes the best way to appreciate the view is to take a step back and let go of our fears. What do you think? Have you ever found yourself holding on to something out of fear of losing it? We make judgments about things based on our first impressions, like when you meet someone new and think they're friendly just from their smile. That's kind of what anchoring does in finance. It's like setting a benchmark for everything else that comes after. Imagine you're at an art museum and the first painting you see is incredible. Suddenly, all the other paintings seem less impressive by comparison. In finance, people might hear about a big stock gain one day and then judge all future gains against that high standard. It's not always fair, but it happens. For instance, let's say you invested $1,000 in a stock that went up 10% one month. The next month, if it only goes up 5%, you might feel disappointed, even though it's still a gain. This anchoring effect can influence decisions in surprising ways. It's worth being aware of, don't you think? We treat money differently based on where it comes from. It's called mental accounting, and it's pretty interesting once you think about it. Let's say you find $20 on the ground. How would you feel about spending that compared to if you'd earned it yourself? Probably more careful, right? That's because our brains tend to categorize money into separate buckets in our minds. We might view money from different sources as belonging to different accounts, even though they're all just dollars and cents. It's kind of like having different piggy banks for different purposes. But here's the thing. This way of thinking can sometimes lead us astray. For instance, imagine you've been saving for a big purchase, but then you see something else you want. If you tell yourself, "Oh, I'll just use my savings," it might feel less painful than dipping into your regular spending money. But really, it's all just money. The source doesn't change how much value it has or how hard you worked for it. It's worth reflecting on why we do this and whether it's serving us well. After all, our relationship with money is complex enough without adding mental layers to it. What do you think? Have you ever noticed yourself treating money differently based on its origin? We talk about money like it's this solid thing that never changes. Well, hyperinflation turns all that upside down. Imagine you have a big jar of coins, and suddenly each coin becomes worth less than the last one. That's kind of what happens when there's hyperinflation. The value of money drops so fast that people start losing trust in it altogether. Let me give you an example. In Zimbabwe back in the early 2000s, inflation got so bad that people started using US dollars instead of their own currency. They even used cigarettes and beer as money. It was like watching a house of cards fall apart, piece by piece. But here's the thing. Hyperinflation isn't just about money becoming worthless. It's also about people's faith in their country's economy crumbling. It's like watching a beautiful garden turn into a weed-filled mess because no one bothered to tend to it anymore. And once that happens, it's hard to get things back on track. You see, deflation might seem like a good thing at first glance. Who doesn't love saving money? But think of it this way. Imagine you're at a beautiful beach and the tide is slowly pulling back. At first, you might think, "Wow, I can walk further now." But soon you realize that the water is receding too far, leaving nothing but dry sand behind. That's kind of what deflation does to an economy. Prices fall, but people stop spending because they expect prices to drop even more. It's like waiting for a sale that never comes. As a result, businesses struggle to sell their products, and they might even shut down. This leads to fewer jobs and less money circulating in the economy. It's a bit like watching a beautiful sunset, but knowing that night is falling faster than usual. Deflation can be tricky. It might seem appealing at first, but it can actually leave us with less than we started with. Does this help clarify things a bit? We talk about interest rates like they're this abstract concept. Well, let me break it down for you in a way that might feel more relatable. Imagine you're planning a big trip and you need to borrow money from a friend. If interest rates are low, it's like borrowing from a super generous friend who doesn't charge much extra. You'd be more likely to take out that loan and enjoy your trip. But if rates are high, it's like borrowing from a friend who wants a lot back. You might think twice before taking on that debt. This paradox plays out in our economy all the time. When rates are low, people and businesses tend to borrow more easily. It's like when you find a great deal on a credit card €1, you might splurge a bit more than usual. But when rates rise, people get more cautious. They might put off buying a house or starting a business because they don't want to take on too much debt. It's kind of like when you see a sale coming up, but you decide not to buy just yet, waiting for an even better deal. The question is, what's the right balance? Too low rates can lead to bubbles, while too high rates can slow down growth. It's a delicate dance between encouraging spending and keeping things stable. You see, currency manipulation is a bit like trying to make yourself smaller by shrinking your clothes. It might seem like a quick fix, but it ultimately doesn't solve the problem. When countries devalue their own currency, they're essentially saying, hey, our money isn't worth much, so let's make it worth even less. But here's the thing, it's not just their money that gets affected. Imagine you're at a big potluck dinner, and everyone brings their favorite dish. If one person suddenly decides their food isn't good enough, they might try to make it sound better by lowering the volume. But guess what? Everyone else still hears how it tastes. Similarly, when a country devalues its currency, other countries still see the real value of their goods and services. It's all about perception versus reality. Let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to lose weight by eating more? It sounds silly, right? That's kind of what currency devaluation is doing a euro. It's trying to appear stronger by becoming weaker. And just like how that diet plan won't work, currency manipulation often leads to more problems than solutions. It can cause inflation, hurt local businesses, and even lead to economic instability. So, instead of trying to shrink your currency, maybe it's better to focus on making your economy strong from the inside out. After all, wouldn't you rather have a full plate at that potluck dinner than just a smaller portion? We talk about money and its value changing, like when you exchange dollars for euros while traveling abroad. Well, this happens all the time with countries too. Their currencies, or money systems, fluctuate in value compared to each other. It's kind of like how the weather changes from day to day a euro. Sometimes things get stronger, sometimes weaker. Imagine you're a small business owner in the United States selling electronics online. One day, your products become more expensive for customers in Europe because the dollar suddenly became less valuable compared to the euro. That could hurt your sales. But then, maybe a few months later, the situation reverses and your products become cheaper for Europeans. It's like riding a roller coaster a euro. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes down. This constant change affects how countries trade with each other. Some countries might benefit from these fluctuations, while others struggle. It's a delicate balance that can impact entire economies. For instance, imagine if the value of coffee suddenly dropped worldwide. Countries that produce a lot of coffee would be happy, but those that import a lot might find themselves struggling to afford it. It's a complex dance between nations, all trying to maintain stability in their economic relationships. You see, tariffs are often touted as a shield to protect domestic industries, but they can end up being more like a boomerang. Imagine throwing a stone into a pond a euro. The ripples spread far beyond the intended target. Tariffs may seem to help one industry, but they can hurt others and even backfire in unexpected ways. For instance, consider this. When countries impose tariffs on imported goods, the prices of those products typically rise. This might make sense for protecting local manufacturers, but it can also lead consumers to seek cheaper alternatives from other countries. It's like trying to hold water in your hands a euro. The harder you squeeze, the more likely it will slip away. Moreover, tariffs can trigger retaliatory measures from other nations, creating a cycle of escalating protectionism. This is akin to a game of musical chairs, where everyone tries to find a safe spot, but ultimately, no one wins. The economy becomes less efficient, and trade relationships become strained. You might wonder, but what about jobs? Well, while tariffs might create some temporary work in certain sectors, they often come at the cost of higher prices and reduced competitiveness in the long run. It's like building a wall to keep out competition, only to find that the wall also keeps out potential customers and growth opportunities that in the end. Tariffs are often a short-sighted solution to economic challenges. They might provide quick relief to specific industries, but they can lead to broader economic instability and decreased global cooperation. As we navigate the complexities of international trade, perhaps we should consider more nuanced approaches that balance protection with openness, rather than resorting to tariffs as our primary tool. You see, globalization is kind of like a big, bustling marketplace where goods and ideas flow freely across borders. It's brought us so many wonderful things: cheaper electronics, diverse foods, and opportunities to connect with people from all over the world. But just as a busy market can be exciting yet overwhelming, globalization has its downsides too. Some folks worry that as we trade more with other countries, jobs back home might disappear. It's a bit like watching your favorite local shop close down because a big chain store moved in. It can feel sad and uncertain. Now, I'm not saying this is always true, but sometimes free trade does lead to job losses in certain industries. Imagine if all our clothes came from overseas factories instead of local mills. That could mean fewer jobs for textile workers here at home. On the other hand, free trade also creates new opportunities and often leads to lower prices for consumers. So it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? As we navigate this global economy, we need to think carefully about how to protect both our jobs and our place in the world market. It's a complex issue, but one that's worth exploring further, don't you think? We feel like we're standing still while the world around us is moving fast. That's kind of what's happening with innovation right now. New technologies are coming along and shaking things up in industries that thought they were set in stone. It's like watching a river change its course. You see the old path one day, and the next, there's a whole new landscape. Take self-driving cars, for instance. They're not just replacing human drivers. They're changing how we think about transportation altogether. Imagine being able to hop in a car and tell it exactly where you want to go, no need to worry about traffic or parking. It sounds like science fiction, but it's becoming reality before our eyes. But here's the thing. This isn't all bad news. These disruptions often lead to new opportunities and ways of doing things. It's like when the printing press came along and made books more accessible. Suddenly knowledge wasn't just for the privileged few anymore. So, as we watch these changes unfold, maybe we should be asking ourselves, what skills will be valuable in this new landscape? How can we adapt to these shifts without getting left behind? And what new possibilities might emerge from all this upheaval? Remember, change can be scary, but it's also what makes life interesting. As the saying goes, the only constant is change. So let's embrace it, shall we? We marvel at how far technology has come. It's like watching a slow-moving river change its course over time. Automation is kind of like that river, gently but surely reshaping our job landscape. Now, I'm not here to scare you. It's not all doom and gloom, but it's worth thinking about. You see, just as machines can make our lives easier in many ways, they're also taking over some jobs we used to think were safe. It's a bit like when computers first came out and everyone worried they'd replace all the typists. But instead, they created new jobs we couldn't have imagined back then. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how sometimes your phone suggests places to visit based on your past searches? That's automation at work. It's not replacing human experience, but enhancing it. The key is to embrace change and focus on developing skills that complement rather than compete with machines. After all, humans have something special: creativity, empathy, problem-solving abilities that even the smartest AI can't fully replicate. So while automation may take some jobs, it's also creating new ones we haven't even thought of yet. It's a bit like watching a tree grow. Sometimes branches fall off, but new ones sprout in unexpected places. The question is, what kind of branch will we grow next? We feel like we're working harder than ever, but our paychecks don't seem to reflect that. It's like trying to fill a bucket with water faster and faster, only to find out the hole is getting bigger too. This paradox of productivity is quite puzzling, isn't it? As we churn out more work than ever before, why aren't our wages keeping pace? It's almost as if we're running on a treadmill that's moving faster and faster, but we're not getting anywhere. Some folks might say it's because technology is making us more efficient, so companies don't need to pay us as much. But that doesn't sit right with me. I mean, shouldn't increased efficiency lead to better compensation? Maybe the answer lies in how we measure success. Instead of just looking at hours worked, perhaps we should consider the value we bring to the table. After all, a good meal isn't just about the number of ingredients used, but how they come together to create something delicious. Similarly, maybe we should focus on the quality of our work rather than just the quantity. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? Or am I just spinning my wheels? You see, income inequality is kind of like a seesaw. When one side goes up, the other comes down. It's not always easy to spot, but it's there, quietly affecting our lives. Imagine wealth as water in a bucket. When it's evenly distributed, everyone gets a good drink. But when it concentrates at the top, it leaves others parched. This concentration can lead to economic instability, like a house of cards that might topple over. It's not necessarily fair, and it's definitely not ideal for society as a whole. Think of it this way. If most people have just enough money to get by, but a few have so much they could buy a small island, that's a problem. It's like we're all trying to climb a mountain together, but some folks are already at the summit while others are still at the base. This imbalance can create tension and make it harder for everyone to reach their full potential. It's worth considering how we can work towards a more balanced distribution of wealth, don't you think? We borrow money from friends to start a new project? It's kind of like that with government debt. Governments borrow money to fund big projects and services that benefit everyone. This borrowing fuels economic growth because it allows businesses and individuals to invest in things that might not happen otherwise. Think of it like planting seeds €1. You need to spend money up front, but eventually, you'll see flowers bloom. However, too much borrowing can be risky. Imagine borrowing so much that you can't pay back your friend. That wouldn't be good for either of you. The key is finding the right balance. Some economists argue that moderate levels of public debt aren't harmful and can even stimulate growth. They point out that many countries have successfully managed debt over time, but others warn that excessive borrowing could lead to financial troubles down the road. It's a bit like cooking €1. You want just the right amount of seasoning to make everything taste great, not too little or too much. As we reflect on this, it's worth considering what kind of projects our governments should prioritize when taking on debt. After all, we're all in this together. You see, private equity firms often use debt to buy companies, kind of like taking out a big loan to purchase a house. This leveraged buyout allows them to control more businesses with less of their own money invested. It's a bit like renting many rooms in a large house using only a small down payment €1. You have a lot of space to work with, but you also have a lot of responsibility to make the payments that they take over these companies. They often try to restructure things, streamlining operations and cutting costs. Imagine tidying up a cluttered attic €1. You might get rid of old trunks and organize what's left. But sometimes this process can be painful for employees who lose their jobs or for customers who experience changes in service. Private equity firms aim to sell these companies after making improvements, hopefully for a profit. It's like selling a renovated house for more than you bought it for. However, critics argue that this approach can lead to short-term thinking and neglect of long-term consequences. They might focus too much on quick fixes rather than building sustainable businesses. You could wonder, does this model really benefit everyone involved? Or does it just create a cycle of debt and rapid turnover? These are questions we should consider when looking at how private equity operates in our economy. We take risks in life, hoping for big rewards. That's kind of what venture capital is all about. It's like planting seeds in fertile soil, but instead of flowers, you're growing companies. The thing is, not all those seeds will grow into towering trees. Some might struggle to reach the sunlight, while others could become giants overnight. Venture capitalists are willing to bet big on those potential giants, even though many will fail. It's a high-risk game, but when it pays off, the rewards can be enormous. Imagine investing $10 million in a company that becomes worth billions €1. That's the dream, right? Of course, there are no guarantees, and many investments won't pan out. But for those that do, the returns can be life-changing. It's a bit like playing the lottery, but instead of just winning money, you're trying to change the world through business. And that's what makes it so exciting and challenging at the same time. You know how crowdfunding seems like this amazing way to democratize finance? It really does feel like we're all holding hands and building something beautiful together. But here's the thing, it's not quite as straightforward as it looks. Think of it like trying to build a house with a bunch of volunteers. On one hand, everyone gets to contribute and see the progress unfold. It's empowering and exciting. But on the other hand, there's no big boss to keep everything on track. Sometimes, people might forget to show up or do their part. And what happens if someone decides they don't like the design anymore? It can get messy fast, and I remember hearing about this project where people raised thousands of dollars to build a community garden. Sounds great, right? But then they realized they didn't actually own the land. It was all just a big misunderstanding. They ended up losing all their money and still without a garden. It made me wonder, what if crowdfunding isn't as magical as we think it is? Maybe it's more like trying to herd cats than build something beautiful together. But at the same time, Look at all the amazing things people have created through crowdfunding. It just makes me realize how complicated life can be sometimes. We feel like we're caught between two worlds. That's kind of what's happening with peer-to-peer lending versus traditional banking. It's like being offered two different paths to reach the same destination. Imagine you're planning a road trip. The traditional banking route would be like taking the highway a Euro. It's familiar, well mapped out, and there are plenty of rest stops along the way. But peer-to-peer lending is more like taking a scenic route through back roads. It might take longer, but you get to see things you wouldn't otherwise notice. Now, here's the interesting part. Both routes have their advantages. Traditional banks are like big, sturdy houses a Euro. They offer stability and security. They've been around for ages, so you know they'll still be standing when you need them again. Peer-to-peer lending, on the other hand, is more like a cozy little cottage. It's not as grand, but it feels more personal. You're directly connecting with the people you're lending to or borrowing from, which can make the experience feel more genuine. But here's the thing. Just because the cottage looks smaller doesn't mean it can't shelter you from the storm. In fact, sometimes those small, intimate spaces can provide more warmth than a cold, impersonal mansion. So, which one should you choose? Well, that depends on what you value most. Do you want the comfort of knowing exactly where you stand, or do you prefer the excitement of discovering hidden gems along the way? Both options are valid, and the best choice will depend on your unique situation and priorities. We feel like we need a little guidance in life. That's kind of what robo-advisors offer when it comes to investing. They're like having a smart, always-on financial coach who helps you make decisions based on data and algorithms. But here's the thing. While they're great at crunching numbers and spreading risk, they might not have the same human touch as talking to a real person. Imagine trying to learn a new skill a Euro, let's say playing the guitar. A robot could teach you all the right notes and finger positions, but would it be able to understand when you're feeling frustrated or excited? Maybe not. Similarly, when it comes to money matters, sometimes we need more than just facts and figures. We need empathy, understanding, and maybe even a bit of creativity. So, the question is, do you want to trust your investments to a machine, or would you rather have a human expert who can see the bigger picture? It's not necessarily one or the other a Euro. Many people use both. After all, maybe the best approach is like having a good friend who understands you. They can give you advice when you need it, but also knows when to step back and let you figure things out on your own. You see, blockchain technology is kind of like a big notebook that everyone shares. It's transparent because anyone can see what's written in it, but sometimes that transparency can feel a bit too much. Imagine you're sharing your diary with the whole world a Euro. It might be great for accountability, but not so great for keeping secrets. The thing is, privacy is like having a private room in your house. You want people to know you exist, but you don't necessarily want them peeking through your windows all day. Blockchain tries to balance these two things, but it's not always easy. For instance, think of medical records. They need to be shared among doctors, but you probably don't want your entire health history floating around for anyone to read. So, we're still figuring out how to make this work smoothly, like finding the right key to unlock both transparency and privacy at the same time.